What's going on, guys, and happy Thursday. It's almost the weekend, week 3 of set championships, and it's almost February. So what decks should you expect to be the best moving forward into next month? A lot of this maybe comes as pretty obvious, and maybe you don't really think that this video is needed, and maybe you're right. But at the end of the day, it's still fun to talk about, and I have some thoughts on which decks truly will pop up and be a bit more threatening. So moving forward, we have Amethyst Emerald, the semi-aggressive, the semi-mid-range, but we all agree on the tempo build, and coming out with like Merfolk, Banzai, Merfolk, Flynn Rider's kind of seen less play, but having the late game threats of Goat and Go-Go Tamago to close out games, I do think it still earns a tier 2 spot, and overall I think this deck is just very consistent, and it can be quick, but it also has those ways, like we mentioned, to close out a game in the late game if they don't quite get there ahead of time. Amber Amethyst, for a little bit there it looked like this deck was going to come back, but at the end of the day, when it comes to hyper aggressive quick decks, I just think that it falls a little bit flatter than some of the other decks on the list. It's not quite as resilient, and it tends to run out of its hand, and that is just not a good combination to be into. Speaking of aggressive decks, Amber Steel Aggro, with or without the Dwarven Mine. Where would I put this deck? Again, you can play it with or without your Dwarven Mine. Where? I've always been pretty critical of it, and before, like 2 days ago or 3 days ago, I would definitely have been like, I think it's going to be tier 2 moving forward. But it had such a strong showing this past weekend in set championships. I think I have to respect it a little bit more than I initially planned to and put it still at that tier 1 deck. A lot of people are probably like, well, yeah, no duh, obviously it's a tier 1 deck, and I don't disagree. Something about this deck, I usually don't feel that threat in playing against it unless I get absolutely boat raced. But that happens if they open the hand, right? Like if the right deck opens the right hand. Look at Baja Blast. If that deck opens the right hand, you lose. Green Steel Discard. If they open the right hand, you lose. I think this deck, it just can be prone to running out of steam if you know how to pilot against it and they don't hit like their draw cards. It can become difficult for them to try to play through with. Blue Steel, the first of the Blue Steel decks we're going to talk about. Blue Steel Control. I still think that this deck is better than people give it credit for. I'm going to put it into that like mid tier 2 range. I don't know why it's not seeing more play personally. I think that the deck has an incredible toolbox. I think it's very strong. It's resilient. It has tools for, like I said, incredible toolbox. The ramp, it can be aggressive, it can be slower. I think the deck is just better overall than people want to give it credit, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it just pop up out of nowhere and people are like, what, this deck's still good? Yes it is. Sapphire Amber, Hero Songs, another deck that doesn't really get played or talked about. I think it should though. I would put it actually above Amber Amethyst. I think it's a very sneaky strong deck because you have to pay attention and read your cards between like Anna and Alice and Little Anna, the 2 costs. Like if you're not reading the cards, if you're not reading the cards, it can be very sneaky because all of a sudden your big Anna quests and now all your heroes get +1 lore. Your Little Anna, you have other heroes on board. She already has 2, now she has 3. So now all of a sudden she quests for 3. Or you have your Alice in play too, and you quest with Big Anna. Alice gets the +1, Little Anna gets the +1, and the +1 from having a hero. So then Alice quests, gives reward and +1 now, giving 4 lore to your 2 cost Anna, and all of a sudden, you have a 2 cost 1/4 that's questing for 4. That's pretty good. I'm just saying, that's pretty good. And that'd be like a turn 5 play. So what if you slap down like a Donald Duck Bodyguard, give the bonus lore in there too? That's 5 lore from 1 card, including 3 and 5. You'd get 10 lore in that 1 turn. The deck can be sneaky because people don't like to read their cards. Lemon Lime Discard. This deck like seemingly just fell off the face of the earth, and I tried playing it and I understand why. I think it still can be decent, and when it hits, it hits. I just think Green Steel is still so much better. I think Baja Blast is so much better. I don't see this deck being this big threat that people once thought it would be. That's pretty much all I have to say about that deck. I took this deck to set championships. I got my Scar promo. I had another viewer say that they took a similar list and they were able to get their promos, so I always love hearing stories like that as well. Jafar's World. I want to be biased and put it in tier 2, but I'm going to hold back, and I'm going to say it's a very, very strong rogue deck. Again, I want to be biased and say tier 2, but that'd be me being biased. So I'm going to try to be honest with myself and say it's probably just a really, really strong rogue deck. Absolutely a deck that can get you your Scar promo. Potentially even do better depending on the meta you're in. There's a lot of intricate play lines, though, that it comes down to, and I was playing like a Amethyst Steel aggro version of Jafar because I didn't want to be like Jafar or bust. I didn't want to lose if I don't see Jafar, because I had a lot of games testing where I didn't see Jafar. So it's like I needed a separate win condition outside of that, and I didn't want to tunnel vision my mulligans and all my play lines into Jafar. I wanted to be able to play the deck, and if Jafar comes up, it comes up, and that's my closer. That's the ace in the hole, right? But I played essentially Amethyst Steel aggro with the chance to Jafar my opponent is more or less how I was looking at it, and I really, really liked the deck. Ruby Fasa. Ruby Fasa. Where do we put you? I'm going to go... Do I go behind Blue Steel? I think I do. I'm going to go behind Blue Steel in tier 2. I think it's going to be lower end tier 2. I've usually been pretty critical of Mufasa decks, but this format I actually like them a lot. I just happen to like Steel Fasa a lot more, and I'm going to put it right near the top of tier 2. I think Steel Fasa is in an incredibly good spot right now. It's got so much tools, so many good cards. It can be fast, it can play a longer game, it can be threatening. I think this deck really has the toolbox to handle the entire meta right now, and it's a great anti-meta choice. Steel Fasa last week alone also had a very, very strong showing in set championships. I just think it's a deck that to not sleep on. Ruby Fasa, also a strong deck. A guy at my local area has been playing it and getting multiple Scar promos with his Ruby Fasa deck. So absolutely, Ruby Fasa is still good too. I just think Steel Fasa is the better of the two. Ruby Amethyst. Well, you guys probably knew this one already. Ruby Amethyst is going to go up there as tier 1. It's really not a surprise. The deck's too consistent, too good, and it just overall does too much. I guarantee you already know another deck that's going in tier 1, but we're just not quite to that point yet. I could sit here and talk about this deck for a half an hour, but it's going to be stuff that we've already talked about. Ruby Amethyst is just that deck until something to our card pool changes drastically. Purple Steel. This is the... I updated some images, by the way, guys, if you couldn't tell by the Steel Fasa, and now this one too. Maleficent's gone. The Whole New World on that one's gone. Amethyst Steel. This is a bit more of an aggressive, but can be kind of mid-range tempoed back a little bit. I don't think it's quite as good as Amethyst Emerald, but overall I think it's still a really strong deck because it can jump out to those quick, fast starts and put a lot of pressure on your opponent, and you play so many just powerful cards, but it also still has that mid-game aspect of it. I just think it's a little bit weaker than Amethyst Emerald. I think it's really close, but a little bit weaker than that deck. We're going to stay on Amethyst Steel. Repeat, Bounce House. This is just the more controlled version. So it can still be quick. It can still do a lot of the similar things, but you're playing more mid to back game. And I'm going to, because they are so similar, I'm going to leave it in tier 2, but it's going to be like at the bottom of tier 2, because I just think the faster paced one is the better overall version to be playing right now. Popsicle, kind of like Ruby Amethyst. I could sit here and talk about the deck, but at the end of the day, it's the best deck of the format. Results show it, time and time again show it. The deck's just too strong at what it does. So, yeah, Ruby Sapphire is just going to be our tier 1 deck threat. Blurple. Okay, bias aside on the Jafar deck, this deck's going in tier 1. I'm even going to put it ahead of Amber Steel's aggro. Maybe it's not performing quite as strong, but it's performing very strongly. Just like we predicted, this deck has been absolutely on a tear. It's been doing incredibly strong. Having played it, it feels like I'm always in every game. Like, this deck just seems to be able to do it all. I really, really like Blurple right now. I've gone into the grindiest match I've ever had versus Will at Locals with Popsicle and was able to come out on top. I've been able to go race and take down Dwarven Mine decks and other fast blue steel aggro decks, and be able to adjust and pivot into a more responding to an aggressive deck and beating them that way too. I think the deck really does answer just about everything. Sometimes those quick decks, though, they're going to just have like the god hand and they're going to go under you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Like, there's no deck in the game that's going to stop the perfect hand in some of those decks. If they have that, sometimes they have it. Green steel discard. I still think this is a strong deck. I'm going to put it right about there. I think it's really, really good. I called it as, I want to say, did I put it at 8th in my top 10 list for set championship? I think I did. I think I put it at 8th. But anyway, the deck is still insanely strong, and we've seen some of the top players in the game still trust in it and play it, and I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. I think that Green Steel Discard, it's a deck no one likes to play, and no one likes to play against it, but it's still very strong, and it's going to stay in our meta. Blue Steel Aggro. I actually like this deck a lot. I'm going to put it ahead of Purple Steel. I think that it's a little bit quicker and forces more response early on. And for that reason, I think I'm going to put it just ahead of Purple Steel Aggro moving forward, because it's a little bit newer of a version of the deck, and I think it's going to be explored more. And moving forward, again, I think that it's going to be into February better than Purple Steel is at the moment. So keep that in mind too, guys. This isn't necessarily at this exact moment. This is going into February, what decks I expect to perform overall the best. Steel Song. Where do I want to put Steel Song? Feels weird not having them in that tier 1. With Popsicle doing so good, and it seems like with so many aggressive decks, they should do better. But I'm going to put them at the top of tier 2. So we're going to bump down Steel Mufasa just a hair and put Steel Song in that spot instead. I think that's warranted, and I think that it's earned its spot. Like, Steel Song is just still one of the best legacy decks of the game. Like, it's been around since the beginning. It's so strong, and when piloted right, like, you can win so often. But it just has such a bad Popsicle matchup, and even Blurple, I'd argue, isn't a great matchup. And if you have weak matchups into tier 1, you're just going to have problems overall. It's easily the best tier 2 deck, but like, I think it has a bad Popsicle and Blurple matchup, and its RA matchups like 50-50. So it's like their tier 1 matchups just aren't quite good enough to put this deck any higher at the current moment. And that's it for this. We talked about all of the relevant... Oh, I guess we do have one more deck, hey? Forbidden Mountain. Shout out to them, guys. Check them out on YouTube. They put this deck together. It's actually something early in the format I had messed around with a lot, and it was fun. Felt gimmicky. I'm like, nah, we're going to move on from this, and their version is quite a bit different. I didn't run the Clarabelle lines and things like that. I played Iago for the turn 5 hand dump. I think their version's much more consistent, and that's why it started to see a little bit of results. But overall, I still think Baja Blast is gimmicky. I don't think that this deck is insanely strong. I think that if it hits like the perfect hand, I think it's really good. I think that it can do straight up just unfair things and make you not want to play the game. It makes you hate the game with what it can do. Maybe it has one of the highest ceilings in all of Lorcana, but having played against it a bunch, it feels like if they don't hit muses, I'm not worried about their deck at all. And if I have a way to get rid of muses, it's like they just, I don't know. The deck, it's like I said, it's such a interesting spot because it can do so bad, but the ceiling on this deck is so high at the same time. So I don't know. I still think it's kind of gimmicky. Typically, to me, when a deck's floor is that low and the ceiling is that high, to me that screams gimmicky. Again, can't really base my playtesting too much off of it because the lists were so drastically different. I guess not really drastically. They ramped and they discarded and they, did that stuff. But again, the Clarabelle is incredibly strong. Like, you bounce your entire opponent's board essentially back to their hand, or you use your welcome, shuffle it into the deck, draw 2 cards, then muses bounce another card. You just outed 2 cards, put 3 in their hand, drop a Clarabelle. You're drawing like 3 to 10 cards sometimes. Like, and then next turn you just bend to my will, get rid of everything. Like, it can hit and it can do really good. I don't think that the deck is the deck. I don't think it's that deck. And unless none of their tournaments are being posted to like Dreamborn, all the tournaments they're doing really good with are less than 25 players. And not that that means a whole lot, because obviously if a lot of those guys are there, right there tells you that player level can be high, but just for the sake of tracking events, we try to track bigger ones, and they do too on their meta updates. So no love lost there, but shout out to those guys again. Forbidden Mountain, go check out their channel. They do great meta updates. Dan does a lot of work. Does a really good job with the Lorcana community. One of the few channels I do regularly watch. But overall, I'm not the biggest fan of the deck. I think that it can do really well, and if it's your day, it's your day. No one's going to stop you. But at the same time, I think it relies a little bit more on a few things to go right, where I'd like a deck that can not have to do that as often. But overall, guys, 20 decks, probably arguably the 20 best decks. Let me know, what deck did I miss out? What deck are you curious about? What deck's too high? What deck's too low? What are your thoughts on the hottest deck? Baja Blast, Sapphire, Emerald, discard from the Forbidden Mountain right now. Last time too, by the way, we do have our Whatnot stream. Actually, not last time. Tomorrow will be the last time I mention it. Whatnot stream going live tomorrow. Link down below. Referral link if you're not already joined on there. Get a little free bonus. Thanks, guys, for watching. Until next time, take care.